Welcome to the Harris County Flood Control District's virtual community engagement meeting to discuss the Arbor Oaks Stormwater Detention Basin. This virtual community meeting is being offered by the Flood Control District to share vital information with the community and to gather your input on flood risk reduction efforts in your area. Community engagement is a critical component of our work, and we appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us this evening. My name is Robert Fricke with the Flood Control District Communications team. I am joined tonight by a team of Flood Control District leadership and subject matter experts to ensure we continue to keep you up to date on important flood mitigation efforts in your community. We are glad to see the community engage with this project and look forward to continuing to share updates and keeping you all in the community informed. First, we would like to begin tonight's meeting with remarks from Harris County Precinct 1 Commissioner Rodney Ellis.
Hi, I'm Rodney Ellis. On behalf of Harris County Precinct 1 and the Flood Control District, welcome to this informative meeting about significant flood control projects in your area. As always, we have you in mind when we design projects to mitigate flooding to protect your homes and businesses. We want to be transparent with all projects because we cannot do it without your participation. Every community, regardless of the zip code, deserves increased protection from flooding. That's why equity is our guiding principle in assigning our infrastructure investments. In addition, we're prioritizing communities that are most vulnerable to flooding and have historically taken the longest to recover. Let me thank flood control officials for developing this and other projects across Harris County. Most importantly, thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to participate in this community meeting tonight. We know you could have been somewhere else doing something else, but we're glad you're here. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Ellis. We appreciate you sharing remarks for tonight's meeting. This virtual public meeting will begin with a presentation to share project updates, including an overview of the Arbor Oaks Stormwater Detention Basin, the project design, and next steps. We'll also share a few updates on nearby projects. The presentation will be followed by a virtual question and answer session with Flood Control District team members who will respond to your questions and comment on some of the frequently asked questions we receive from the public. Attendees will be able to submit comments and questions through the website or by phone. Any comments not addressed during the Q&A session will receive a response from the Flood Control District after the meeting. Instructions on how to participate in the virtual meeting are included on this slide, on this virtual meeting webpage, and on the Flood Control District's website. I will also share a reminder of these instructions when I reach the Q&A portion of the meeting. We will now transition to Herman Sanders, also with the Flood Control District's communications team, who will share information about the Flood Control District and this project. Herman, over to you.
Thank you, Robert, and special thanks to each of you for joining us. In this presentation, we'll give you a brief overview of this project, but before we get to the project specifics, we want to share a bit of background about the Flood Control District. So what is the Harris County Flood Control District? The Harris County Flood Control District is a special purpose district created by the Texas legislature in 1937 in response to devastating floods that hit the Houston area in 1929 and 1935. Flood Control District is governed by the Harris County Commissioners Court and works closely with other entities in our region, such as the Harris County Engineering Department and the City of Houston. We were created in part to serve as a local partner to leverage federal funding for flood damage reduction projects. Our mission has expanded since our founding, leading to billions of dollars in federal, state, and locally funded infrastructure improvements. Let's talk a little bit about our mission. The mission of the Harris County Flood Control District is to plan, implement, and maintain flood risk reduction projects guided by community and natural values. One of the most difficult challenges we face is constructing effective projects that are sensitive to community and natural values in highly urbanized areas. Harris County includes 23 main watersheds totaling approximately 1,800 square miles and more than 2,500 linear miles of channel. That's a lot of miles, And in fact, 2,500 miles is approximately the distance from New York all the way across the nation to California. And what is a watershed exactly? A watershed is a geographical region of land that drains to a common channel or outlet. Let me say that again. A watershed is a geographical region of land that drains to a common channel or outlet. Each watershed has its own unique characteristics and needs. The project we are presenting tonight is in the White Oak Bayou watershed. Harris County is flood prone for a variety of reasons. One, Harris County has extreme rainfall events, including tropical storms and hurricanes. Two, our land is flat and slow draining. And three, we have clay soil, which does not absorb excess rainfall very quickly. It's not a very spongy soil. While the flood control district plays a critical role in flood risk reduction, we are one of several entities involved in these efforts in our region. This image helps explain some of the various jurisdictions involved. Inside neighborhoods, as shown on the left side of this illustration, storm sewers and roadside ditches collect stormwater runoff and start the process of moving it away from homes and streets. These drainage systems, like roadside ditches or storm sewers, may be managed by the Harris County Engineering Department, a municipal utility district, or a city, such as the City of Houston. The stormwater then makes its way to the larger bayous and channels, and eventually to Galveston Bay. The bayous and channels are the responsibility of the flood control district. That's us. This is shown on the right side of the illustration. In the middle is a stormwater detention basin. Our agency may construct a stormwater detention basin to serve as a regional flood risk reduction project, or it could serve as mitigation for channel conveyance improvements, such as widening and deepening a channel. Widening and deepening channels create more capacity to move more stormwater out of an area. Since it is our policy to avoid any adverse impacts from our projects, detention basins help to safely take in and temporarily store that increase in stormwater so that the improvements made in one area don't, simply put, move the problem elsewhere. Often, we partner with Harris County precincts, utility districts, and others to add recreational amenities such as trails to these basins and along our channels. So, how do we get all this done? To accomplish our mission, our teams focus on planning and implementing flood risk reduction projects across Harris County, all while maintaining our vast infrastructure network. All three of these activities, planning, implementing, and maintaining, are critical to ensuring the resilience of our region and the safety of our residents. Our efforts to plan and implement flood risk reduction projects focus on adding capacity to our network and reducing flood risk for neighborhoods across Harris County. At the same time, maintenance teams work day in and day out to ensure our channels are ready to operate as designed during the next storm. Now let's talk a little bit about the 2018 bond program. Back on August 25th, 2018, Harris County voters approved $2.5 billion in bonds for flood risk reduction projects. This vote followed a series of 23 meetings with community members across Harris County, one per watershed, which resulted in a list of what is now 181 bond IDs. Each bond ID may have multiple projects, and the actual timing of each individual project depends on a variety of factors, including funding, environmental permitting, right-of-way acquisition, and utility relocation, and in some cases, the requirements of a particular grant. As bond projects move forward, we're making significant progress toward resilience in Harris County. In 2024, we shared an update with Harris County Commissioners Court and highlighted a few notable statistics. We have completed 42 bond IDs, secured $2.7 billion in partnership funding to progress the bond program even further for our community, and hosted more than 200 community engagement meetings. Your input is critical to our efforts, and we want to ensure our conversations continue. We'll continue these updates moving forward to share progress on the program. While the bond was for $2.5 billion, the estimated total cost of every project in our bond project list is much more. We made it clear from the outset that we would need funding partners to fully construct the projects in the bond program. As I mentioned, we've had significant success so far, having secured more than $2.7 billion in partner funds for projects across Harris County. As this graphic illustrates, there are sources for funding partnerships, including federal, state, and local funding that the Flood Control District is working to secure for Harris County. Each agency has its own definition of eligible projects, as well as its own requirements for local match funding. And the Flood Control District works diligently to match each project with the appropriate partnership opportunities. The estimated total cost for the Arbor Oaks Stormwater Detention Basin project is $41.4 million, which again is just the estimated cost to see the project through to completion as of today. I want to highlight one funding partner for the Arbor Oaks Stormwater Detention Basin project, and it's the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, also known as HUD. The Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery Program is one of the funding programs under HUD. Disaster recovery funding is focused on projects helping communities with long-term recovery after a federally declared disaster. Hurricane Harvey, which hit Harris County in 2017, is the federally declared disaster that allows the Flood Control District to apply for the disaster relief funding. The Texas General Land Office, or GLO, administers the grant program at the state level for HUD. This means that the GLO distributes funds to local, county, and state agencies that apply for and are approved to receive funding for projects benefiting areas directly impacted by Hurricane Harvey. The Flood Control District has been awarded approximately $322 million for projects meeting the funding program's requirements. The Arbor Oaks project is receiving $34.2 million in CDBG disaster recovery funding. This project's service area was determined to benefit households where at least 50% of the population meets the federal classification of low to moderate income. All Flood Control District projects receiving CDBG disaster recovery funds must be completed by February 28, 2027. I previously mentioned several sources that fund projects by the Flood Control District. Let's take a look at each of the funding sources for the Arbor Oaks Stormwater Detention Basin. First, after voter approval of the 2018 bond, the Flood Control District initiated bond ID C-15 for the Arbor Oaks Stormwater Detention Basin. The 2018 bond program allocated funds for this project for property acquisition and preliminary engineering efforts. Then, additional funds were allocated from the Flood Control District's capital improvement program. As we mentioned, we also secured a $34.2 million community development block grant through the disaster recovery opportunity and $10.8 million from Natural Resources Conservation Services, or NRCS, through its Emergency Watershed Protection Program. The total project budget under the project charter was $41.4 million, but this amount is subject to change as it is only an estimate. All non-CDBG funding sources must be applied to this project prior to our ability to utilize CDBG disaster recovery funds. Just a quick reminder, we would like your input as we discuss the project in more detail. Please feel free to drop any questions or comments into the comment box, or if you're on your phone, you can comment by pushing the star key. And now I'd like to transition the presentation over to Jonathan St. Romain with the Partnership and Programs Division with the Flood Control District. Jonathan will share more information about the Arbor Oaks Stormwater Detention Basin. Jonathan, over to you.
Herman, and we'll start by talking about the White Oak Bayou watershed, as the Arbor Oaks Stormwater Detention Basin project site is located within the White Oak Bayou watershed, and Herman talked about what a watershed is earlier in the presentation. The map on the screen identifies the limits of Harris County through the black outline, and the White Oak Bayou watershed is shown there in yellow. The red pin on the map shows the approximate project location within the watershed. The White Oak Bayou watershed spans across 4 Harris County Commissioner precincts and multiple municipalities as it stretches from central to northwest Harris County and includes the cities of Jersey Village and City of Houston. Overall, the White Oak Bayou watershed covers 111 square miles with 146 miles of open waterways, including White Oak Bayou itself and its major tributaries, which are Little White Oak Bayou, Brickhouse Gully, Coal Creek, and Vogel Creek. So now let's take a look at this specific project. The Arbor Oaks project site is located in Harris County Precinct 1 and within the limits of the City of Houston. The project is also located just northwest of the intersection of Antoine Drive and West Little York Road. The project directly intersects with the confluence of White Oak Bayou and its Vogel Creek tributary. Following Tropical Storm Allison, and that was in 2001, the Flood Control District initiated a robust countywide voluntary buyout program to help move eligible homeowners out of harm's way. The program included several homes in the Arbor Oaks neighborhood. Since the early 2000s, 207 former owners of flood-prone properties within the Arbor Oaks subdivision have been assisted in moving to higher and drier ground through the Harris County Flood Control District's home buyout program. Over the last few years, an additional 19 properties within the proposed project footprint were acquired in order to design and soon construct the Arbor Oaks Stormwater Detention Basin. The visual on this slide shows the typical project life cycle of a flood risk reduction project. And while every flood risk reduction project is unique, they all typically have a common life cycle. Each project begins and ends with predictable milestones along the way. We're currently approaching the end of the design stage for the Arbor Oaks Stormwater Detention Basin, and we're getting close to the construction stage. There are several steps required prior to starting construction, but we anticipate breaking ground on this project in the third quarter of 2025. So let's take a minute to further explain how stormwater detention basins work in flood mitigation. Stormwater detention basins provide storage for runoff of floodwaters. This storage is temporary and it prevents water from overwhelming channels. While channel conveyance improvements move stormwater more efficiently out of an area, stormwater detention basins can be strategically located to temporarily store increased water to ensure the risk of flooding is not transferred to downstream communities. When channel stormwater levels drop back down, the stored stormwater that's in the basin drains back into the channel by gravity through outfall pipes that are appropriately sized to drain the basin. This is important because, as we mentioned before, the Flood Control District is a no adverse impact agency, which means we don't allow our project to reduce flooding risk for one area by increasing them for another. And note that when stormwater detention basins are used in conjunction with channel conveyance improvements, stormwater detention is usually constructed first to avoid those adverse impacts, and these basins do provide benefits on their own in this interim condition. While all stormwater detention basins essentially function to store stormwater, they can be designed in many different configurations. They can be designed as one large basin, as shown here, or made up of several compartments that function together. Stormwater detention basins and their compartments can be designed as either wet bottom or dry bottom. Wet bottom stormwater detention basins feature a permanent pool of water. The area from the top of the permanent pool up to the top of the bank is available for additional stormwater storage. Dry bottom detention basins function the same way, but they feature a grassy lining and are designed to drain dry between rain events. Some dry bottom basins, if they're large enough, can even be used for recreation between storms. In this project, we're designing a combination wet and dry bottom compartments. So when we talk about stormwater detention basins, we talk about how much stormwater they can hold in a unit of measurement called the acre foot. And that measurement refers to the volume of water that's 1 foot deep over an area of 1 acre. For context, think of 1 football field covered with 1 foot of water. During the preliminary engineering stage, the Arbor Oaks project was originally expected to provide 431 acre-feet of stormwater storage. However, the storage volume was subsequently lowered to 221 acre-feet to account for an environmental issue that affected the design of compartments 2 and 3 that are on the west side of the project area, and I'll explain more about this in a minute. So with this information in mind, let's dig deeper into the project objectives and design. The Arbor Oaks Stormwater Detention Basin aims to reduce the risk of flooding in the Arbor Oaks and Greater Inwood neighborhoods in the White Oak Bayou watershed by providing additional stormwater storage along White Oak Bayou and Vogel Creek. The project site is located within the current FEMA regulatory 100 and 500-year floodplain. And along with Harris County's clay soils that don't readily absorb water that Herman discussed earlier, the topography of the area also creates a bowl-type effect that naturally causes stormwater to collect. So therefore, the structures that were within the project footprint were at a higher risk of flooding during heavy rain events, simply due to the natural topography of the land. By purchasing these homes and helping to move the residents to higher ground, we were able to demolish the structures, and we ultimately intend to construct this stormwater detention basin within this area of Arbor Oaks. We can leverage the natural topography and increase the stormwater storage capacity to reduce flood risks for the surrounding area. At the last community engagement meeting in 2021, which was held during the end of the preliminary engineering stage, we shared that the Flood Control District planned to construct a stormwater detention basin within this 68-acre site to provide additional stormwater storage capacity in the region. The initial design proposed a 4-compartment wet bottom stormwater detention basin design. You'll notice that two compartments are on each side, separated east and west by Vogel Creek, in order to maximize stormwater detention volume and help restore natural habitat to this area. Additionally, an existing easement for 2 natural gas pipelines, which pass through the area and cross Vogel Creek east to west, needed to remain in place, effectively requiring the basin to be divided into 4 compartments. Now, as we made progress in the design stage of the project lifecycle, where we finalized the design plans, the design has evolved from the initial concept previously presented. The project site is still 68 acres, and the design still features a stormwater detention basin divided into 4 compartments. But 2 of the previously proposed wet bottom compartments, labeled as 2 and 3 in the graphic, those will now be dry bottom compartments. Compartments 1 and 4 remain as wet bottom compartments. The pipelines remain in place since the cost of relocation or removal of those pipelines would be prohibitive for the project. Additionally, the proposed project limits will also not impact the 13 homes along Vogel Road. These properties were excluded from the project footprint because the cost of the properties really wouldn't provide enough benefit to significantly increase the stormwater storage capacity of the basin. All property acquisition activities related to the proposed project have been completed, except for the street abandonments through the city of Houston, and our team is working through this process. So now let's talk for a moment about why the design changed. After an environmental assessment, the design of the detention basin needed to be modified due to some contamination issues underlying compartments 2 and 3. The Flood Control District routinely conducts environmental assessments as part of our projects. Finding areas of isolated contamination during the preliminary engineering stage is not uncommon. Sometimes remediation is required, but sometimes it's possible to work around the area of contamination, which is what the Flood Control District is able to do in this case by modifying the design of the basin to avoid the contamination. As a result, the construction of compartments 2 and 3 will be limited to a maximum depth of 10 feet below the ground surface, including underground components essential to the function of the basin that will not be visible after construction is complete. Additionally, to protect from fluctuating groundwater levels, a waterproof liner will be installed within these compartments to isolate stormwater stored in the basin from the underlying contaminated area within the soil. The Arbor Oaks Stormwater Detention Basin is expected to provide approximately 221 acre-feet of stormwater storage. Based on the Atlas 14 100-year design storm engineering models, after the project is constructed, the area of inundation from that 100-year storm event is expected to be reduced by 52 acres and 2.3 miles of roadway. And water surface elevations along White Oak Bayou are expected to be decreased by as much as 0.05 feet. And when we say water surface elevations are decreased, we mean that a particular storm event will cause White Oak Bayou to rise to a specific level today, before the project occurs. But after the project is completed, that same specific storm event would produce a water level in White Oak Bayou that's lower there before, so that flood risk to homes and people is lower. Also, as part of this project, a benefit already realized even before construction has started is that numerous flood-prone structures have been demolished and cleared so that they'll never flood again. As part of the grant from the Natural Resources Conservation Service, natural restoration of the area is a key component of the project. Tree preservation to protect existing mature trees where feasible has been incorporated into the design of these compartments. The design plans also include the planting of 77 trees within the 68-acre footprint site, and the plans also call for thousands of wetland plantings. And let's not forget that removing the flood-prone homes, roads, and utilities helped return the land to the natural floodplain habitat. Now that I've provided an update on the current design and the project's benefits, let's take a look at the outlook for the Arbor Oaks Stormwater Detention Basin project and our next steps. When following our project life cycle, after the design stage comes the construction stage. As part of our standard practice, the Flood Control District will advertise the project for bids. We anticipate this happening next month. After the bids are received and reviewed, the contract can be awarded after approval from the Harris County Commissioner's Court. Based on our current timeline, we anticipate construction to start in the third quarter of 2025. And if everything progresses according to plan, the project could be completed by the fourth quarter of 2026. As we get closer to construction, we'll provide more updates to the community. Please make sure you sign up for our mailing list by visiting hcfcd.org/C15 and submitting a comment. During construction, please note that you may encounter things like truck traffic and heavy machinery on the streets near the project site. There will be one access point on the corner of Vogel Road and West Little York that will be used for entering and exiting the project site. But again, we'll provide more detailed updates once we're closer to starting construction. So to recap, the next steps for the Arbor Oaks Stormwater Detention Basin include finalizing the design of the stormwater detention basin and its components. Then, upon completion of the design, we'll proceed with advertising the project for bids and gearing up to start construction. As we move forward in the project lifecycle, we'll continue to keep you informed of our progress and share construction details. As I mentioned, construction is anticipated to begin in the third quarter of this year, with an estimated completion date by the end of 2026. In addition to the Arbor Oaks Stormwater Detention Basin, I want to quickly give an update on two nearby projects. I'm happy to share that the White Oak Bayou Federal Flood Damage Reduction Project's segment from FM 1960 to Hollister Road is now complete. And the final segment, which is from Hollister Road to Coal Creek, is anticipated to remain under construction until the third quarter of 2025. As for the Inwood Forest Stormwater Detention Basin, this project started construction in May of 2023 and is still actively underway. The stormwater storage capacity for the combined 12 interconnected compartments is approximately 1,200 acre-feet, which means it will provide a total capacity of a little over 391 million gallons of stormwater storage. It's anticipated to be complete in early 2026. If there are any questions about these nearby efforts, please drop your question in the chat and we'll get back to you after tonight's meeting. And now I'll turn the program back over to Robert to kick off the Q&A.
Thanks, Jonathan. Before we move into the Q&A, I want to share a quick reminder that we're looking for your input. We'd love to hear from you on this and other projects moving forward across Harris County. Your input is critical as we continue to develop project plans for this and other flood risk reduction efforts. All comments and questions received this evening will be considered as we develop plans for this effort, but the conversation doesn't end here. To learn more about this project, ask questions, and sign up for our mailing list, please visit hcfcd.org/C15. As a reminder, there are 3 ways to submit a comment about this project during tonight's session. On this site in the box near the presentation live stream, on the Flood Control District's website at hcfcd.org/C15, or via phone at 855-925-2801, utilizing meeting code 10955. If you are joining us via phone tonight, please press star to leave a message. Additionally, I want to reiterate that any questions not addressed during tonight's Q&A will receive a response from the Flood Control District after the meeting. Information from this meeting and a recording of the live stream will be available on the Flood Control District's website and YouTube channel. Joining Jonathan for our Q&A session tonight is Carrie Hobble, project manager for this project. Now it's time to take some of your questions. All right, Jonathan. The first question of the evening is from Kay. Kay is asking about the Inwood Forest Stormwater Detention Basin Compartment H. Is this Arbor Oaks project connected with Compartment H or the Inwood Forest Detention Basin project in any way?
Yep. Great question. The answer is no, it is not. So Inwood Forest is just up the road or just up the channel from the Arbor Oaks project. But these are 2 separate projects. They are designed separately. They're funded separately. They're being constructed separately. They are relatively close to each other. You can see there, like I said, Inwood Forest is just upstream, kind of to the northwest of Arbor Oaks. They will function separately as they are separate. However, I'll say they do function in the same way in that they're both stormwater detention basins, and we talked about that earlier, how they function. They're both adjacent to White Oak Bayou, so as the level of White Oak Bayou rises during a heavy rain event, Both projects are going to function to take in and store that stormwater to help reduce the load on White Oak Bayou so that the channel doesn't get overwhelmed so quickly. So they're separate projects, but they function in a similar way because they're both detention basins and they're pretty close to each other.
Thank you, Jonathan. And Jonathan, sticking with you for another question. You touched on this during the beginning of the presentation, but could you remind folks that have joined us tonight of the exact area for this project?
Yeah, so the project covers about 68 acres. Again, we talked about it within the White Oak Bayou watershed. It's south of Victory Drive, where it meets White Oak Bayou and its Vogel Creek tributary. Of course, it's in the former Arbor Oaks subdivision, and that's located just northwest of the intersection of Antoine Drive and West Little York Road.
All right, thank you, Jonathan. And let me give you a break and pass the next question to the project manager for the Arbor Oaks project, Carrie Hopple. Carrie, how much stormwater will this basin hold?
Good evening. The basin will provide approximately 221 acre-feet of stormwater storage, which equals to approximately 72 million gallons of stormwater. For reference, this is about 221 football fields covered with 1 foot of water.
Thank you, Carrie. And in a follow-up question for you, what is the objective of this project?
The primary objective of the Arbor Oaks Stormwater Detention Basin is to reduce flood risk in the Arbor Oaks and Greater Inwood neighborhoods by increasing stormwater storage capacity along White Oak Bayou and Vogel Creek. However, we are also restoring the area back to nature, which was also a key objective in this project.
All right, thank you, Carrie. And also, residents are obviously curious as to when this project will begin construction. Jonathan talked about project stages in the presentation, but can you also share with us what that means in terms what that means in, oh, 1 second, 1 moment, sorry about that. There we go. Sorry, let me reiterate. Can you share with us what that means in terms of the construction start?
Sure. The Arbor Oaks Stormwater Detention Basin project is currently in the design stage and nearing the construction stage. The design is being finalized and the project is expected to be advertised for bids next month. Construction stage is anticipated to begin in the third quarter of 2025 and be completed by the fourth quarter of 2026.
All right, thanks, Carrie. Jonathan, can you talk a bit about the funding sources for this project, please?
Sure. That's a great question. And so this project is a really good example of how we have to fund these larger projects with multiple funding sources. And sometimes it's difficult to convey the scale of these projects. We're talking about tens of millions of dollars, right? We have the $41 million cost estimate, which really illustrates the scale of the need for flood risk reduction projects in the area. And that just translates into some pretty substantial costs. So when we look to find funding sources, a lot of times we have to seek multiple partners, and that means multiple grant programs. These grant programs that are out there, they're not always they don't always have $41 million, and so we've got to piece together some smaller grants to get to that price tag. So the Arbor Oaks Stormwater Detention Basin, like we said, is being funded from multiple sources. A pretty large chunk of that is $34.2 million from the Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery Program. And Herman talked about that in the very beginning of the presentation. Community Development Block Grant is a grant program that comes through HUD, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, and it flows through the state level, the Texas General Land Office. So that's $34.2 million. And we have an additional $10.8 million from the Natural Resources Conservation Service, and that's through an Emergency Watershed Protection Program grant that we have received from NRCS. And then in addition to that, we've got funds from our 2018 Flood Control District Bond Program and the Flood Control District's Capital Improvement Program.
Thank you, Jonathan. And Jonathan, this project is located in a former subdivision community. Can you let us know why properties in Arbor Oaks were bought out?
Yeah, so following Tropical Storm Allison, the Flood Control District initiated a pretty robust countywide voluntary buyout program to help move eligible homeowners out of harm's way. The program included over 200 homes in the Arbor Oaks neighborhood since 2003. So if you want to find out more about our buyout program, you can go to our website at hcfcd.org. And you can actually Google HCFCD buyout program, and we've got a great website on there that shares the latest on the whole program, what we've accomplished so far, the partnerships that we're seeking for those buyouts, and then the buyout process from start to finish.
Just one moment, please. Everyone, it appears we're having some technical difficulties. All right. Jonathan, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
There we go. Perfect. Sorry about that. So sorry about that. Jonathan, moving on, our county's waterways are definitely multi-purpose. Moving stormwater out of Harris County during heavy rain events through the county's robust bayou system is our agency's primary focus. But on sunny days or nice evenings, residents can frequently be seen walking, running, or biking along the channels. Do you know at this time if there are going to be any hike and bike trails constructed?
So the short answer is no, we don't know quite yet, but maybe. So the mission of the Harris County Flood Control District is to plan, implement, and maintain flood risk reduction projects guided by community and natural values. And so those community and natural values are important to us, and we know the residents in this area are very active, and we support the multi-use of our basins and channels for recreation. You'll see that all over the place in the county along our channels and basins. The Flood Control District does not typically construct or maintain recreational amenities such as trails, but we do welcome partnerships with other entities who wish to do so, as long as those activities don't interfere with the property's primary flood risk reduction purposes. And so we work with lots of different partners for trails and recreation. But for this project, you can actually reach out to the Houston Parks Board for any questions about possible recreation within the Arbor Oaks project. And that's email address is info@houstonparksboard.org. All one word, Houston Parks Board. info@houstonparksboard.org.
Thanks, Jonathan. And let's just take a moment real quick, just to remind everyone who has just come in to the live stream that there are 3 ways to submit a comment about this project during tonight's session. You can submit a comment on this site in the box near the presentation live stream, on the Flood Control District's website at hcfcd.org/C15, or via phone at 855-925-2801, utilizing meeting code 10955. If you're joining us via phone tonight, please press star if you want to leave a message. Also, want to reiterate that any questions not addressed during tonight's Q&A will receive a response from the Flood Control District after the meeting. Information from this meeting and a recording of the live stream will be available on the Flood Control District's website and YouTube channel. Okay. Moving on, Jonathan, another question for you. Construction is a very exciting project stage, but it can get a bit messy at times. So can you help to focus area residents on the end result of this project once built? In other words, what are the anticipated benefits of this project?
Sure. That's always a great question. So the Arbor Oaks detention basin is expected to provide about 221 acre-feet of stormwater storage, and we talked about that earlier in the presentation. And what that's going to do is during a heavy rain event, as White Oak Bayou and Vogel Creek rise up, a portion of that water in those channels will get diverted into the detention basin and held in there so that those channels don't get as overwhelmed as they might get without the project. So we've determined during the preliminary engineering phase that in a 100-year storm event, once the project is completed, the water level in White Oak Bayou is going to be lower than it would have been in the same storm event without the project. And so the area of inundation will be reduced by about 52 acres, and it will lower flood risks along 2.3 miles of roadway. And another benefit of this project, and we mentioned earlier when we talked through the buyouts, that's already been realized before construction begins, is that all of those flood-prone structures have been demolished and removed from the area.
Thanks, Jonathan. Carrie, Eileen has joined us tonight and is asking how will construction equipment for the Western Compartments access Vogel Road at Little York? Do we have that information available to share tonight with Eileen?
Thank you for the question, Eileen. So that accessing a project site is something that we coordinate with the contractor once we have them selected and the contract is awarded. We will coordinate that with them. We do have stabilized construction access areas for them to come onto the project site, but we will coordinate where they're routing their vehicles from basically after they're selected and right before construction starts.
All right, thanks, Carrie. Our next question is for Jonathan. Jonathan, maintenance is a very important part of the work we do. Is the flood control district responsible for maintenance and upkeep of stormwater detention basins after construction?
Generally speaking, yes. So mowing, debris removal, and vegetation management are the responsibility of the flood control district. We mow the majority of channels and basins 3 times a year during the growing season. However, sometimes a municipal utility district or a homeowners association may choose to enter into an agreement with us where then they take on the responsibility of additional mowing. If they want more than those 3 times a year, they can enter into an agreement with us and they can mow more often. If a recreational sponsor chooses to build and maintain a recreational amenity on flood control district property, mowing may be part of that agreement too, if it's appropriate. And as it relates to Arbor Oaks, which was part of the voluntary buyout program, the flood control district did mow those buyout lots 8 times a year, about once a month during the growing season.
All right, Jonathan, thank you very much. Jonathan, sticking with you for the next question, Harris County is flood prone as a region based on several factors that Herman mentioned in the presentation. Flat, slow draining land, clay soils, tropical storms, or just heavy rainfall in general. Will this project protect areas from future flooding in this area?
It will help, but we'll say it's impossible to say that any one project will completely end flooding in an area. This project will reduce the risk of flooding by storing the excess stormwater during heavy rain events, and that's the 221 acre-feet of storage that we talked about get stored in the detention basin instead of overwhelming the channel. But the risk of flooding will remain in this area and everywhere in Harris County, and so for that reason, the flood control district does recommend that everyone in Harris County and surrounding areas purchase flood insurance.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. We may have had a bit of an issue, an audio issue there, but we can come back to that later. But thank you for your response. Our next question is for Carrie. Carrie, Kay is asking about the streets in Arbor Oaks. When will those roads be removed, and can you give any additional details on that?
Yes. So once we get a contractor selected and awarded on this project, we will go over the project with them and talk with them about what they want to do in regards to how they want to schedule their excavation. And part of getting the excavation done on these projects is moving and demoing the roads. So that question will have better timing once we talk with the selected contractor who gets awarded this project.
Thank you, Carrie. I think now may be a good time to review the types of stormwater detention basins again. Jonathan, can you please explain what the difference is between a wet bottom basin and a dry bottom basin? And can you also talk a bit about why our agency often avoids using the word pond as in detention pond?
Sure. And first, I'll ask if you can hear me okay.
Absolutely. Yes, sir. Perfectly.
Okay, great. So I'll answer the first part of the question first to help explain the second about the word pond. A wet bottom stormwater detention basin design features a permanent pool of water at the bottom of the basin, and it's often surrounded by vegetation in sensitive habitat maintenance zones. Our detention basins are typically connected, for lack of a better term, to a nearby channel and a pipe or a series of pipes or a weir structure to keep the permanent pool of water within the basin. The storage area above the permanent pool of that wet bottom is down. It's excavated lower, 10 or 15 or 20 feet down below ground level. So the storage area is above that permanent pool all the way up to the top of the basin banks. And that's what's available for additional stormwater storage. A dry bottom stormwater detention basin is just that. Instead of the permanent pool of water that's way down 10 or 15 feet below ground level, a dry bottom detention basin has a dry, grassy bottom. It's designed to drain dry after a rain event, and it remains dry in between rain events, and we're able to mow the bottom of it because it drains dry. We're designing a combination of dry and wet bottom compartments as part of this stormwater detention basin project. So now, why do we not say ponds as part of our communications? Well, we often construct dry bottom detention basins, and so those basins will only look like ponds during rain events, and then they drain dry. So we avoid saying detention ponds to be clear in describing our projects, especially in this case, as we have 4 compartments as part of this basin, and only 2 are designed to have permanent pools. We also avoid saying ponds so we can differentiate stormwater detention basins from amenity ponds. A lot of times you'll see amenity ponds in neighborhoods, and these won't serve the purpose of taking in and storing excess stormwater like our detention basins do. So while our wet bottom basins do have a permanent pool of water that's down much lower than ground level, that pool is much lower than the elevation of streets and homes, and it's this vertical space that gets used to store the stormwater during the rain events. Amenity ponds are different from that. They don't have the storage capacity, and so that's why we try not to talk about ponds.
All right. Thank you, Jonathan. Next question is for Carrie. Carrie, community engagement is a key component of the work by the Flood Control District. Can you let us know if this is the first time the community has heard about this project?
Well, I am the newly designated project manager for the Arbor Oaks Stormwater Detention Basin project. This project has been in the works for years as it went through the project life cycle stages. So I am picking up this project at the end of the design stage and before the extra exciting construction stage, well, at least from the public's perspective, I'm sure. So the Flood Control District held a community engagement meeting about this project in April 2021. At that meeting, this project was in the preliminary engineering stage, and we shared information about the initial design for the stormwater detention basin and its compartments. As you know, there have been some changes to the initial design since preliminary engineering, which is not uncommon as the project team gets more information or data to consider during the design stage.
All right, thanks, Carrie. And also, what other opportunities will there be for public input on this project?
The Flood Control District always welcomes input on projects at any time. If you don't get a chance to ask your questions tonight, or if you think of a question you wish you would have asked, please visit www.hcfcd.org/C15 and click Submit a Comment to ask a question or provide project input.
All right, thanks, Carrie. And Jonathan, back over to you for this one. Mr. Mackey and Mr. Salas want to learn more about the contamination issue. How significant is this issue? Where did it come from? And what are the plans to deal with it or remediate?
Yeah, so great question. Finding these environmental concerns during our project is
Jonathan, your microphone is dipping out again. Sorry. Your audio.
Okay, is this better?
Perhaps you can perhaps reconnect or.
Okay, I'll jump back out and come back in.
Okay, no problem. We'll come back to Mr. Mackey, Mr. Salas. We will come back to your questions. Moving on, Carrie. Carrie may have touched on this one on one of your earlier answers, but we often receive concerns from residents about increased traffic caused by area projects where roads or lanes are closed for safety or access purposes. Can you let us know again if there will be road closures or disruptions in the area? And Kay would also like to know if we plan to have a single point of access for construction.
Yes, thank you. It may be a little too early to be certain, but the thought at this time is that while no major road closures are expected, there will be increased construction activity, including truck traffic and heavy machinery near Vogel Road in West Little York. That activity does have the potential to create some possible slowdowns in the area. However, if there are any major closures, we will follow traffic guidelines and have flaggers or whatever is needed to comply. And yes, our project will have a couple of accesses into it.
And thank you, Carrie and Jonathan. You were able to reconnect. Back to the question from Mr. Mackey and Mr. Salas. They want to learn more about the contamination issue. How significant is the issue? Where did it come from? And what plans are there to deal with it?
Sure. Can y'all hear me okay now?
It's better. It's better.
It's better. Okay, I can try to get a little closer. Maybe this helps.
Perfect.
Good. So finding these environmental concerns during our flood control projects is not uncommon, especially in urbanized area that have a history of industrial or commercial activity. As part of our preliminary engineering stage, earlier we talked about the project life cycle. During that preliminary engineering stage, before we move into design, we conduct lots of field activities like geotechnical investigations and surveying. And one of the main things we also do is these environmental investigations. The environmental investigations include cultural studies and wetland delineations and determinations, as well as an analysis on endangered species. And then that comes up with the contamination issue is what's called an environmental site assessment. And it's the environmental site assessment that identifies the contamination issue. And so through that study, we go through our environmental in-house folks and consultants on the engineering team go through a series of analyses to figure out exactly where the contamination is, where it's coming from, and what we can do about it, coordinate with permitting agencies to make sure that that our path forward is able to get the project permitted. So in this case, we were able to basically isolate and avoid the contamination that's in the soil by modifying the project design to not go quite as deep. And so they found that contamination down deeper in the soil. And so by adjusting our project design, we were able to not go as deep and avoid that. And so, yeah, if we need more detail on that, we can get our environmental staff in touch with some more of the technical and specifics.
All right. Thanks, Jonathan. And for our last question tonight, Jonathan, if you could take us out. We have some HOA representatives join us tonight. A special thanks to those folks joining us tonight and all they do for the community. There are a lot of different projects going on in the Arbor Oaks and the greater Inwood area, from what I'm hearing. AT&T is doing some work out there, and also the West Harris County Regional Water Authority has a substantial water line project underway. The Flood Control District has a couple of projects going on in this area. Can you, Jonathan, talk about the Flood Control District's projects in the area in addition to the Arbor Oaks project?
Sure. So the White Oak Bayou Federal Flood Damage Reduction Project segment from FM 1960 to Hollister is complete. And then the final segment of that project from Hollister to Coal Creek should be under construction until the third quarter of this year. As for Inwood Forest, this project began back in May of 2023. It's still actively underway. That's a big project, 12 interconnected basins with 1,200 acre-feet of storage. And so that's anticipated to be complete in early 2026. And if there's other questions about these nearby efforts, you can drop your question in the chat and we'll get back to you after tonight's meeting. Thanks.
Thanks, Jonathan. And with that, I would like to share one final reminder that you can submit a comment after today's meeting on the Flood Control District's website at hcfcd.org/C15. We also encourage everyone to get flood insurance as flood season in Harris County runs year-round. Thank you again for joining us this evening and for providing your input on this project. We look forward to continuing to share updates as our work moves forward. Stay safe and have a good evening.